All right, good afternoon. I'm going to keep this short. We just finished passing the budget out of the House. We truly agreed and finally passed budget bills 2 through 20, technically. And I'm going to hand it over to the ranking member on the Budget Committee, Betsy Fogel, to take your questions.
Happy to take questions.
Was the final price tag the 50.7? Does that sound right?
I am so sorry I don't have the conference number in front of me, but I'm happy to get that to you very quickly. I don't want to misspeak.
Okay.
You expressed some concerns during House Bill 2002 about that Navy money. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. In the conference committee room earlier this week, we were given assurances by the chairman that the $118 million, there was a discrepancy between how the House funded the foundation formula and how the Senate funded it. Significant concerns related to the cigarette tax and gambling money and those dollars not being there next fiscal year, leaving a roughly $45 million shortfall on top of the $190 million that we're already not funding the foundation formula at. We were told, I asked a question, Senator Nuremberg asked the question multiple ways and multiple times on if we could count on that $118 million being real dollars. And the answer to that question was yes every time we asked it. Later on that afternoon, it was discovered that that wasn't factual or accurate information. I know a group spent the day negotiating yesterday trying to fix that mistake, and I am very disappointed. I think that's the most disappointing thing for me. I'm coming out of wrapping up the budget process, that we were not given the opportunity to make good on our word and to fix that roughly $45 million shortfall. I am thankful that we put the blind pension fund money back in. We saw that happen in House Bill 20. However, I don't think that that's necessarily the most appropriate use or the best way of funding the futures of our children. And that still leaves roughly an $18 million hole on top of, again, the $190 million that we're already short.
So when your chamber sent these bills over to the Senate, originally you in the press conference said these were our 5 priorities. And
Yes.
I'm curious where those things stand.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. Have the list in front of me. In the beginning of the budget process, I always meet with the budget chair to go over what are the things most important to House Democrats. That list included fully funding self-directed services and day habilitation rates. That was accomplished in both the House and Senate version, so that'll make its way to the governor. Child care subsidies, fully funding that. We were able to put the $51 million back into the child care subsidy program. That was a huge win for House Democrats and most importantly, a huge win for working families across the state. We were unable to fully fund the foundation formula. We were able to put in additional $15 million for school transportation. That was on our list of priorities. Unfortunately, we were unable. You heard a lot of conversation today, and you will always hear a lot of conversation from my side of the aisle on our concerns with privatizing education. We were unable to get that additional $10 million out or to reduce the amount to zero, which of course would be my preference. I think I've made that pretty known. So we weren't able, unfortunately, to get that done. We were able to have a rate increase for Mosers, put in the domestic violence money. That was something that was really important to us, and fund recovery community centers and recovery support services. That was our top list of 10, and we were able to get 8 of those 10 accomplished.
When we look at higher education, I know this gives a lot of power back to the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development to come up with a plan by December 1st. That plan could still be rejected though, and there's a lot of uncertainty. What would you say to these smaller colleges and universities that if it went to enrollment based would lose a lot of money? I know it hasn't gone to that, but because of this uncertainty, what would you say to those institutions?
Yeah, I think my thoughts on moving to a model that only includes one metric, FTE, I have been clear about those. Even though Missouri State, my university where I represent and my alma mater would have been a winner, it would have forced other schools across the state to close their doors. And quite honestly, 2- and 4-year colleges and smaller communities across the state. I'm uncomfortable ending educational opportunities for any student who calls Missouri home, and I felt that that model would do so. Basically, what the language in the budget does is encourage or recommend that the department puts together their own model of a funding formula. There's no binding language there. It will be a recommendation that I think probably we could have just officially requested from the Department of Higher Education. We will have to see. I can't speculate on what that work will look like, but I do hope it includes more metrics other than just FTE.
We've heard that this is a tough budget year, but we're still dipping into reserves. I mean, how do future General Assemblies fix that?
Future General Assemblies are going to have a very difficult task ahead. We still have a multi-billion-dollar gap in shortfall of where we are ending fiscal year 2027 and where we're going to move in fiscal year 2028. I have been very public and used my platform every opportunity I have to point out the fact that though we felt pain this year in the budget room, subsequent General Assemblies are going to feel even more, with continued conversations about the elimination of the income tax and no guarantees that those will be revenue neutral, with continued implications from the implementation of House Resolution 1, or the One Big Beautiful Bill, knowing that that itself is a multi-billion-dollar deficit to the state of Missouri. People in these seats in years to come are going to have very difficult decisions ahead of them, and I hope we continue to stop injecting self-inflicted wounds, which I think some of these things are.
Given this $2.3 billion deficit in GR spending, do you think Republicans pass a responsible budget?
I think that is a difficult question to answer. I think we have needs right now, and I think certain promises that I have made, things like fully funding educational opportunities for our students, making sure individuals with disabilities are able to stay in their homes, those are very important. There are places in the budget that I would have been comfortable cutting, and I am concerned that we mitigated damage this year, and that damage is going to be made and felt more significantly in the years to come. I don't fault anyone other than people who sit in this chamber and say they can find a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the budget. Well, go to a budget room and find it for me, because clearly it was more difficult than the majority party likes to make it seem. There was a lot of pain. It was not easy to cut what we cut already, knowing that that $2.3 billion, I think that's the number the chair used earlier today as well, that $2.3 billion shortfall will be there in years to come.
The margin for House Bill 2002 passing was much tighter than
It was,
some of the other
83
budget
votes.
bills. Does that kind of signal to you that people across the party line had trepidation about the plan?
I think it does. I can't speak to, of course, the motivations of the members of the majority, and I know enough to know that some felt like the bill was too big and some felt like the bill was too small. The board had to stay open for a few minutes, and several people switched their votes to get to 83. That is a very narrow margin. I think in large part that is because people do have concerns that we not only underfunded our foundation formula by $190 million, but with the uncertainty of this other additional $45 million that people had concerns about. I know I had members of the majority coming to me all day yesterday and all morning this morning hoping for a fix, and that fix was not made evident until late in the budget process, and that fix still only fixed part of the problem.
Were there any discussions ever about, since we're in this tight budget time, were there any discussions about not fully funding Medicaid whatsoever, or perhaps down the road?
If there were conversations about that, I was not privy to them. When you look at our state's history and what we have to do when we are making tough budget decisions, the Medicaid programs are a program that will take a cut. I would imagine this General Assembly in subsequent years will be looking at how much money we can save if we cut things like adult dental, or if we cut durable medical equipment, all of those non-optional services that the state, or non-mandatory services that the state covers that the federal government doesn't require. There is also a piece of legislation moving through the legislative process. Of course, we're 2 weeks out, so I don't anticipate, or I guess a week and a half now, that would repeal the language that required us to cover individuals in the Medicaid expansion group. I don't think that that was done unintentionally. I think there's probably a will of the body to not have to fund Medicaid expansion that now gives access to health insurance quality and affordable health insurance to over 300,000 Missourians. I don't think that's probably separated from the budget conversation. It was said today on the floor that there are concerns from members of the majority that our Medicaid program is too large. That would be one way to cut it if they so chose. Any other questions?
Do you have any, is there anything that sticks out to you about the Narcan money and any VOCA-related efforts?
Can you repeat your question or maybe ask it more specifically?
Yeah, well,
We were able to put the $5 million back in.
so is it
for-
10.1? Is that what Narcan ended up coming to, is 10.1?
I don't want to give you the wrong number. I know we added 5, and the Senate added 5. That didn't get us all the way back to the original request, I don't believe, but I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Okay. And then VOCA-related
And same with
stuff?
VOCA. Yeah, we did put money back in conference. We went with a compromise position between the Senate and the House. We were able to reinstate, I believe, $8 million of that. $9 million, but I think we actually maybe reduced it $1 million, so we could take $1 million and put it towards domestic violence. That was another issue that was really important to my caucus. So I think we ended up with an additional 8 in VOCA and an additional $1 million in domestic violence grants.
Okay, thank you.
You said earlier that taking the 27 million from the blind pension fund wasn't necessarily the best way to help make up for the shortfall in the foundation formula. Can you expand on your concerns about doing it in that?
Absolutely. I think individuals in the blind community have concerns with using that money that was, I should be clear, there is statutory direction that the General Assembly is fully allowed to do that. We originally were going to take 65 million, that was the original number, and adding that 27 gets us above that. I was not made aware of that decision, of course, until today on the floor, so I have not had the opportunity to vet what that additional 27 million will do to the blind pension fund. But I am hopeful that we, and hope I'm putting correct trust in the chairman that we're not doing anything that will negatively impact individuals who rely on those funds. The other thing I will say is the chair spoke about some of the ARPA money in House Bill 20 maybe being applicable or maybe being able to be used to get us back to fully funding that roughly $45 million shortfall. Again, those are dollars that we can't count on. We don't know if those dollars will exist or not. And as I've made clear every time I'm in front of you guys, fully funding educational opportunities for kids in classrooms is my #1 priority. And so I am uncomfortable using dollars that may or may not be there later on down the road, as we've seen this year already with reliance on lottery funds and cigarette tax. Thank you guys. Quickly, I didn't thank you guys earlier and I forgot it, but I was about to cry. Thank you guys for showing up every week and shedding light on the work that we do in this building. It has been frustrating to watch the press corps shrink over the course of the last 6 years. And I hope that's not a trend that we continue to see moving forward. And I apologize and appropriately thank you during my speech, but I just want you to know how much it means that you bring light to the work that we do in this building. And I think that transparency and accountability is important in government now more than ever. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you all.